I think this is my first time in Intramuros in 5 years. So the last time I was here was before the pandemic. Kaya sabi ko kay Prof. Henry, pupunta ako. Because there was an option to present via Zoom. And I think, obviously, after that opener by Father Marquez, which will be a tough act to follow, admittedly, I felt na it was good to see human beings. Kasi nga, we've been cooped up at home for 3 years, talking to a screen. So I think this will be a perfect opportunity to reconnect. I also like that Father talked about ethics. So just a little bit of history. We started Data Ethics PH in 2019. And this is before the advent of ChatGPT, although meron ng mga large language models at that time. And it was very simple. We were having coffee with my colleagues, and I was saying, how come everyone is always talking about the benefits of AI, but no one seems to be looking at the downsides? It started that way. But this is not about also talking about the downsides. There's always two sides of every coin. That's why my talk this morning will be about opportunities and risks. No? A little bit about myself, although I had a very kind introduction. Actually, I'm an entrepreneur, but I started my career in financial services. So I worked in banks in Hong Kong and Australia, and then later went to IT. But my first introduction to technology was actually at the tender age of 6. No, I'm already in my mid-40s, so you can do your math to find out what year that was. And this image on the left was our first home computer. It was a Texas Instruments. I don't know if you've ever seen it. This was a very fortunate accident by my late father. Kasi noong time na yon, also to date it, ang popular computer game was, computer machine was the Atari. Kung naalala niyo yung Atari. So every one of my friends had an Atari. And nataon, yung father ko had a trip to the United States. And sabi ko, pa, bili ka naman ng Atari para makarelate naman ako sa mga kaibigan ko. And as it turns out, kuripot kasi yung father ko. He didn't want to buy the Atari, which was at that time, I think, selling for about $300 to $500, which was a lot of money back in the day. No? But there was this Texas Instruments that was selling for $99. Yan ang binili niya. So I was so excited when he flew back home. I opened the box and said, this is not an Atari. And here's the interesting, I would say, the fortunate accident. So if you remember the Atari, or maybe you might remember Nintendo, you know, it has these cartridges. No? So this machine had only 3 cartridges, and only one was a game. No? One game was this thing called Car Wars, which is like Pac-Man, pero mga kotse. And the other 2 weren't even games. I remember correctly, the second cartridge was a program called Home Financial Decisions. And it was a program that allowed you to balance your loans and deposits. And then the third cartridge was this thing called Securities Analysis, which is basically about stocks. No? It is the Black-Scholes model. So here I am, a 6-year-old, exposed to these things. And then I became a banker in Tuloy, damaged goods. Pero here's the fortunate accident. Because I didn't have too many games, I got tired of the 3 cartridges in a matter of months. One thing that TI had that the Atari did not have was it had a basic programming language embedded in it. So you could write your own programs. So at the tender age of 6, I didn't know what I was doing. I was exposed to programming. And yun, the rest is history, as I said. Okay, I have actually been giving free webinars online about AI. I started about 2 months ago. And the reason why I started doing this, and this is kind of a continuation of that work, is that there doesn't seem to be enough public discourse about AI. That's why I'm very happy to hear this topic of AI being discussed in Letran. We should talk more about AI. I think the challenge now is separating fact from fiction, separating the doom and gloom from the real opportunities, and most importantly, talking about it in terms that everyone can understand. Kasi nga, it's a very technical subject sometimes. And, well, fortunately for us in the academia, we're used to that. Pero ang mga karaniwang tao, they're not. So I started talking, and I said we need more discourse on this subject because it cuts through every facet of our society. And some of the things I'll show you in a few minutes will give you an idea, no? To give more, I guess, flesh to what Father Marquez said. No? Why do we talk about ethics? What's the big deal? Isn't this just a software program? There's more to AI than that. And one thing that I don't have in my slides, I want to pose as a question, since we are in Letran, and this is a Catholic institution, and speaking as a person who's been kind of in and out of my own faith, myself, no, as a confession. One day, AI will become self-aware. That is inevitable. When that time comes, do you think AI will believe that we created it? I mean, think about it. Another intelligence, another sentient thing eventually will happen. Do you think it will doubt that it was created? This has been actually a big turnaround for me in my own faith, because for the longest time as a tech professional, science professional, you know, you vacillate between agnosticism and theism very freely. No? And it made me think, if we are capable of creation at some point, then we must have to admit that we were created. So I just pose that to you as a question, because after hearing Father Marquez's speech, there is really far-reaching implications once general intelligence emerges. That means we have proven that it is possible to create such a thing, that it is not random, as most scientists would have you believe, as I believed. I'm still struggling with that thought, by the way. I just wanted to start with that. So I'm going to divide my talk over the next 40 minutes or so into 5 parts. I just want to start with the preliminaries. I believe Professor Patungan from AAP, who's my colleague, might have already talked about this earlier. Then I'll dive into kind of the top 4 things that people love to talk about when it comes to AI. As a good briefer, talk about jobs, we'll talk about art, education, clearly is an opportunity. I want to show you some use cases of how people are actually using AI today. And as a good rejoinder to Father's talk, I also want to talk about ethics, but from the perspective of people building the AI itself, because there are very real technical dangers with building self-aware machines that people who are not involved in it may not necessarily realize. That's why it's good to connect the dots of what the Vatican says, the Church says, the school says, and from the perspective of a tech entrepreneur, what I encounter on the field. And then after that, hopefully we have time for questions. So what is AI? I think when you Google the term artificial intelligence, you get this. I call it death by Venn diagram. No? Everyone seems to conflate many terms: data science, machine learning, artificial intelligence. And I think where it's coming to is the realm of our artificial intelligence is actually the convergence of many fields. So fields that were perhaps previously distinct or previously separate areas of practice are now all converging. For example, certainly AI involves machine learning, but machine learning is not equal to AI, by the way. In fact, AI predates machine learning. There was another field of AI known as symbolic AI, if you have studied computer science. And the main difference is, just to give you a clue, the symbolic AI believers thought the path to intelligence is accumulating as many rules as possible about the world. And if you compile enough of the rules, then you will birth intelligence. Sadly, that approach has failed. Because clearly it's impractical. How many rules can you accumulate? And would the rules be perfect or biased? Separate issue. And then sometime in the 1960s, a group of people led by Geoffrey Hinton, who's now one of the godfathers of AI, proposed a different approach. They said, forget about writing rules, because that's impossible. All you need is to gather data. And then with enough data and using algorithms, you can birth intelligence. And no one believed them, because at that time, 1960s, 1970s, the technology was just too primitive to process enough data. But now, with the emergence of large language models, we're actually close to a point where you've already amassed enough data that suddenly a machine starts to sound human. It's now passing what's known as the Turing test, which can fool people. But is intelligence really about data? Mamaya, we'll talk about that later. Some other fields that are converging is the area of natural language processing, basically understanding words, text, speech. And then on the opposite side of the boat, computer vision, understanding images, understanding video. And all of this is now converging into what's known as AI today. There's actually a subtle reason for this. I don't have a slide on it, but there is an algorithm called the transformer. If you're into CS, you would be aware of this. And it's interesting because this is the latest, the state of the art in machine learning, where pretty much all of these fields, from natural language processing to computer vision, can now be handled by one algorithm. Previously, you had different types of algorithms for different tasks. You'll do regression here, you'll do neural networks there, you'll do clustering here. But I think it was launched in 2017 by Google. This new algorithm called the transformer is capable of doing general tasks, which is a step towards creating general intelligence. So let's simplify for the remainder of the talk. For at least for this next 40 minutes, let's consider anything that refers to computer systems that attempt to replicate human intelligence. That's AI. It can be anything, right? It can just be an if-then statement. It can be machine learning. The bottom line here is, it's after decisions. That's the subtle difference between just machine learning or just statistics and AI. Because you can do statistics as many times as you want. You can even do machine learning as many times as you want. But it can be for other things. It can be for analysis, it can be for interpretation. But the moment you try to give decision-making in the hands of a machine, that's an attempt to do AI. Because it's actually that action, moving agency into the hands of a machine that now kind of breaks that barrier between kind of humans and its creations. The introduction talked about the fourth industrial revolution. In fact, not too long ago, people didn't probably know there was more than one. You know, parang we refer to industrial revolution as one thing. But one thing about the fourth industrial revolution that makes it distinct from the first three is that this is the revolution where machines can become independent. And that's because of AI. Up until this point, I'm pressing a button and the slides move forward. If this was a fourth industrial revolution laptop, I shouldn't even need to touch it. You should just listen to me and it will automatically move forward. In fact, there are programs like that already. Another thing I want to draw a distinction on, AI has been around for quite some time, 1960s pa nga. But up until recently, the focus on AI has been on what we call discriminative AI. In a nutshell, discriminative means this is AI that interprets data. So sanay tayo with this kind of AI. So I'll give a discriminative AI a picture of a cat, and it will tell me 99% probably a cat. Or a picture of a person pretending to be a cat, and the AI will say, nope, 99% not a cat. The generative AI trend, which is now popularized by ChatGPT and similar software, works a little bit differently. This is AI that produces data as much as it interprets data. So I'll give a generative AI a picture of a cat, and it will produce more cats. Or I will prompt that AI with the word cat, and it will produce cats. So for the remainder of the talk, I'll focus on this. Although both types of AI are certainly important, and both have ethical problems, what's really causing a lot of the alarm, but also the excitement, is this type of AI, the generative kind, which is anything from deep fakes, which produce random variations of an image, to an image generation tool like Midjourney or Stable Diffusion, or chatbots like ChatGPT, which can already converse very close to how a human would. Okay, first discussion about AI refers to jobs. Why is jobs a big deal? Well, since time immemorial, technology and jobs have an interesting relationship. Technology has always had this effect of destroying jobs. In fact, the first industrial revolution was the first time in a global scale people felt that machines could actually replace them. First industrial revolution was the steam revolution. So for the first time, you could boil water and it will move a turbine, and then you can use that to automate things. No? And then everything else built on top of that. In fact, are you aware of the word sabotage? I hope you're not doing sabotage yourselves. No? But the root word of sabotage is the word sabo, S-A-B-O-T. That's not pet malu or lodi. You know? Sabo is actually a word. Sabo is a shoe. It's a wooden shoe in Holland. And why is sabo sabotage? Well, actually, I learned this in Star Trek. No? In the first industrial revolution, when workers were being laid off because machines were already doing their work, there were massive riots everywhere. And one of the things that happened was in Holland, they would throw their shoes into the machines to wreck them, no? Hence the word sabotage. This was also the beginning of the Luddite movement in Europe. The Luddites are the ones who are averse to technology. I'm sure there's a Luddite in every one of us. How many of you are not on TikTok? You're not. What Luddites? Okay. So, call centers are the big area of focus. I will actually be in Cebu, in fact, in a few weeks to address the Call Center Association. And the reason is, one of the biggest areas of application is voice, artificial intelligence. You can already talk to an AI and it can talk back as if it were a human being. And more importantly, and I'll talk about this in a bit, if there's one area of application that best suits AI, it is repetitive and simple work. And that is actually, in a nutshell, what call centers do with humans. So now the challenge is on the call center industry, which, by the way, accounts for more revenue to the country than OFWs already. We need to take care of that industry because it employs basically a big chunk of our youth. It's basically a big chunk of our middle class. And that's an example of how creativity in regulation allowed a new industry to form. No? What was the life hack with the call center industry? Can you guess? This is something that Maro has and some people take credit for. So mga business professors, you should know that the call center industry is exempt from the foreign ownership limits in corporations. That was the hack. Kasi hanggang ngayon, that's being debated. That's actually in the Constitution. You know? But for the call center industry, for some reason, they were able to create a loophole. And that's what allowed this industry to grow. Because let's face it, there's really more money outside the Philippines than inside the Philippines. And by lifting that cap, you allowed money to flow in. But of course, it comes with its risks also. Another talk for another time. According to the World Economic Forum, here are the top most in-demand skills. Obviously, as educators, we need to be wary of this. Number one is analytical thinking, certainly. Number two is creative thinking, which is a surprise, or not. Why do we need more creativity when machines are taking over? Well, simply this. If you're not dealing with the robotic and simple work, what's left for human beings is the creative work. Unless we're ready to give that to AI as well. One thing here that I found particularly interesting is number 8. Empathy. Because in a world run by machines, it now takes tremendous effort to empathize with human beings. Have you ever been, I hope this is not happening in your household, but have you ever been in a situation where you're all having lunch or dinner or outside and no one is talking to each other because everyone is on their cell phones? Lana, empathy zero. No? And some families have to take special rules to remove the cell phones during dinner. Do you do that? Okay. So, because if you're on TikTok, you will never get off TikTok. That's the problem. No? So this is a good indicator of why jobs will inevitably be disrupted. But another, on the flip side, this is not on the slide, I want you to reflect on an interesting industry that we take for granted. No, I don't know if you have any ice cubes on the tables. Wala. Did you realize that the ice industry is an industry that has changed 3 times over the past few centuries? During the time of Rizal, probably here in Intramuros, they already had mais con hielo. But they had no refrigerators. So how did that happen? So the ice industry was a mining industry once upon a time, 1700s, 1800s. And they used to ship ice from Mexico through the galleons. It would arrive here, no, in the docks. By the time it crossed the Pacific Ocean, siguro 40% of the ice had already melted. And it was a very, very valuable commodity kasi nga, it's very transient. Pero can you imagine, back in the day, they could get ice blocks from lakes during winter. This was before global warming, obviously. And then that would be ingestible as mais con hielo. It's certainly a beverage only for the rich. And then that was the way it was for centuries until the early 1900s when the ice plant was invented. I'm sure some of you have seen an ice plant, no? And then ice plant technology gave way to refrigerators after the World War, no? World War I and II. If you might have parents or grandparents that refer to refrigerators as Frigidaire, because that's #1 brand of refrigerator, Frigid Air. #2 was Kelvinator. Kelvin temperature, terminate the temperature, Kelvinator. And then General Electric. So reflect on this, no? It started as a mining industry, then it became a manufacturing industry, naging ice plant. And then later it became a device. Okay, but here's the punchline. When the first ice plants appeared, the ice miners didn't believe it. They said, why would we produce our own ice? We can freely mine, when we can freely mine ice from nature. In fact, we shouldn't produce ice. Only God should produce ice. That was the pushback back in the day, similar to pushbacks against cloning and stem cells, etc. And then in a matter of, I think, a decade, no more ice mining. Why? Because global warming, and 2, pollution, you know. If you wanted to ingest ice from a lake, that's like inviting cholera because of how dirty the water became. Okay? Then World War I and II happened, and when the first Frigidaires came out, the ice plant owners didn't believe it. They said, why should people manufacture their own ice when we professionally manufacture ice in the plant and distribute it? And then now, I'm sure if you buy ice, it probably came from a Frigidaire. You know? So the lesson here is, when we talk about disruption, it's not because of the new technologies. It's because of the incumbents who refuse to believe it. So that's food for thought whenever you have new technologies coming in. And AI is the latest of many. You know? This is why, one thing I'm trying to espouse now. So when should AI and when should humans come in? No? In anything you do or any task you want to achieve, you can probably divide it into 2 axes. No? One is how certain the outcome should be, and one is how complicated it is, meaning how many bits of data or variables you should ingest. So obviously, if it's a low uncertainty and low complexity job, you can automate that. In fact, you should, because some of these jobs are just too demeaning for humans. No? One such example, and no disrespect, I still encounter people whose job is to press buttons in an elevator. It's a job. Siyempre, it's a living. It's an honest living. But really, do you want to waste a human on that? When people can press their own button, no? And cook up a person inside this CO2-filled elevator for a day. Very demeaning. And this is just probably the least demeaning of many demeaning jobs. Then on the same column, you have tasks that are more uncertain. You don't know where it's going to go, but it's still relatively simple. That's when humans should certainly take the lead. We have gut feel, we have experience, we can deal with uncertain situations. So anything that's simple, if it's highly certain, give it to the machine. If it's uncertain, humans take the lead. It's this right-hand column that's tricky, because we're now in an era where we have to do tasks under the environment of high complexity, too much data to use. And this is where I believe humans and AI actually work better together rather than apart. If it's a highly complex task and low uncertainty, my favorite example here is, for example, in a bank, you want to lend to a borrower through credit scoring, for example. The outcome is fairly certain. It's an approve or a decline. But the data you have to ingest is tremendous. The borrower history, the borrower's profile. So humans take the lead, but backed by artificial intelligence. So you use statistical tools, you use machine learning to crunch the data, but then humans ultimately make the call. The reason for this is also straightforward. If you make it completely automated, machines might make decisions that will be to the detriment of the borrower, because it will not make any emotional decision-making. It will be purely a hard cut-off, yes or no. And not all things about society are actually appropriate for a hard cut-off. I'll talk about that later. Which leaves us with this upper right-hand quadrant. If it's a high-complexity task and a highly uncertain outcome, I think AI takes the lead, but guided by humans. Have you heard of the AI known as AlphaFold? Some of you might have heard of it. So it was created by Google DeepMind, and its task was to crack this long-standing problem in biology and chemistry known as protein folding. It's part of a broader practice of drug discovery, where you test various combinations of proteins and chemicals, amino acids, and any combination, viable combination, can lead to the discovery of a drug or a treatment. And humans on their own, backed by AI and statistics, takes years to solve it. In fact, it was an unsolvable task. And then the team at Google DeepMind deployed AlphaFold, which is actually a reinforcement learning AI that was used to defeat the world champion in Go and chess a couple of years back. And it was able to solve it in a few months. So why did this work better? AI doesn't get tired. AI doesn't care if it makes mistakes. It will just optimize until a goal is reached. For as long as humans set the parameters, for as long as humans set the rules, and that worked. There's actually the opposite side to this. For as long as humans set the goal properly, that's also a challenge. And I'll talk about that later when we talk about ethics. There's this also emerging trend, I would call it the mechanics and the drivers. If you are familiar with automobiles, if you know how to drive a car, doesn't mean you know how to change a spark plug. Or doesn't mean that you know how to change your tires. Maraming mga nahihirapan dyan. And vice versa, if you're a mechanic in a talyer, you can know how to change the oil, change the transmission, you can even change the engine. Doesn't mean you can be a Formula 1 driver. We are now at that point in AI, where the people who build the AI, who write code like the one on the right, doesn't mean they will be using it. And vice versa, with the advent of ChatGPT, you don't even need to be a programmer, and you can use these tools. This is a break in pattern, I think. For the longest time, if you wanted to be a user of AI, you needed to know programming. I'm not saying you shouldn't. In fact, as someone who learned it at the tender age of 6, it actually adds tremendous advantage. But let's admit it, there would be probably 95% of anyone in a room who are either afraid of code or don't want to get into programming, but they have a problem to solve. And that was one of the tremendous breakthroughs of ChatGPT. It allowed everyone else who are non-technical to use technical tools. And I think that's a good philosophy to have. We should be able to democratize technology as long as we provide rules and guardrails. No? So the term prompt engineering is now part of our lexicon. It's actually an oxymoron. Like, what are you really engineering? But the fun part here is, and again, I'll draw a little bit of an analogy to the Bible. No? The answer or the quality of the response you get from a chatbot depends on how you ask it. So if you ask it in a stupid way, it will come up with stupid answers, and vice versa. And actually, again, I don't want to be overreaching, but remember how the Gospel of John starts. In the beginning was the Word. I think this is a great analogy for what's happening with chatbots today. We now need to be more mindful of words, how we describe things, how we write things. Because words can benefit us, but also harm us. And I'll get back to that later. Let's talk about art, one of the most contentious parts of AI today. So we are now at a point where even if you're not an artist, you can generate artistic works. And in fact, I'll draw parallels to, again, time ni Rizal, perfect time, 19th century. Did you know that in the 19th century, photography was not considered art? They didn't consider it art. There were already photographs during that time. And the rationale was straightforward. On one side of the city, people were denying the ice plants. On this side of the city, they were denying photography. The reason was, a machine that captures light is not equivalent to a painter with a brush. There's no agency there. There's no creativity there. But can you imagine telling any photographer today that you are not an artist? You know, it's impossible. It took 100 years before it was accepted, when people realized the machine is actually an extension of the artist. Your technology is a paintbrush. My technology is a camera. In fact, it was George Lucas who said, without technology, there can be no art. Maybe siguro singing na lang yung art na pwede mong gawin without technology. And yet you need microphones, no, to amplify your voice. Artists are actually technologists at heart. And yet every time there's a new technology that emerges, the artists are the first to reject it. So food for thought. It doesn't come without its risks. So there's this ongoing lawsuit. I don't know if you can see the image on the right. By Getty Images, which is a popular repository of clip art. And they're suing Stability AI, which created Stable Diffusion, for copyright infringement. And this image on the right, as you can see, looks very similar to the image on the left. It is not exactly the same image, but it looks inspired by, down to the uniform. No? And that's the gray area with copyright at the moment. How do you deal with derivative works? So those of you who are in the law field, you know that we have rules under the Intellectual Property Code on derivative works. You need to have been licensed by the original creator to derive something. But then you do have a copyright on your derivative work. So that's kind of the murky part about this situation. One thing though, where Stability AI might be found guilty of, is if you look closely on the lower right-hand side of the image, the Getty Images logo was also reproduced, albeit a bit garbled. No? And intellectual property law has specific rules about trademark infringement. Even if it's a distorted version of the trademark, if it looks similar enough, you've already violated it. So if I get the McDonald's M and change the color, I could still be guilty of infringing on McDonald's, even if it was a red M, no? Because of the similarity. And of course, our favorite topic, plagiarism using AI. In fact, I would probably say this is still an emerging field of developing AI that can detect AI. Hindi na gumagana yung Turnitin, hindi na gumagana yung mga ibang detectors. The best thing you can really do now is challenge the students' understanding of whatever they wrote. So maybe oral recitation makes a big comeback now. No? I'm sure you all agree. But then I would also say, while we caution our students and our faculty on the dangers of this, there's also, I would say, an untapped benefit or an untapped potential of improving productivity. I'm sure you will relate with me when I say we just have too much admin work in schools to keep up with our teaching load and to keep up with our research load. And that's both a, I think, an opportunity for AI to come in if we are able to set proper rules and guidance. Once upon a time, we wanted to ban calculators. You remember that? Are you still banning calculators? I hope not. No? But it's always the knee-jerk reaction. You always want to ban something that seems disruptive. We can all, again, let's go back to the 19th century, the emergence of the printing press. Books were works of the devil. Remember? I'm sure the priests back in the day said that too. And then calculators would destroy mathematics. And then TV would destroy the youth. Kasi puro MTV na lang yung pinapanood. SMS will destroy the grammar of children, yung mga Jejemon, no? Wikipedia will never be as good as a paid encyclopedia. The internet is full of pornography. Yan yung mga pushback. And then now AI will just destroy originality. So I think the lessons of history need to be remembered because there's always two sides to every technology. We worry about jobs that are lost or could be lost, but we could never predict the jobs that could be created. It's really hard. But we should be also focusing on that too. So I want to give you quickly, before I run out of time, a rundown of some popular use cases for these tools, just to show you what's possible. First thing is, I think OpenAI did us a disservice by comparing ChatGPT to a search engine. It is not. Magkamali tayo doon. A search engine is a database. You write a query and it will get records that match the query. That's okay. We still need that. ChatGPT does not retrieve any data. It creates data based on patterns that it was trained on. That's both good and bad. It's good because it can be very convincing, they say optically correct, but it may not be factual. Kasi nga, it recreates based on patterns. So what you have is, some people are calling it stochastic parrots. No? It's probabilistically true, not factually true. So in fact, ChatGPT should not be a replacement of search engines. It should be used with search engines. So you can, design text, but also make sure the citations are accurate. So I would probably suggest these are the better uses of these tools, or currently at least. Certainly, content creation is a good use for it. In fact, this is me asking ChatGPT, can you create an outline for me for a presentation I will do in Letran? So it did it in a few seconds. I had to write the presentation myself, but it helps to have a skeleton already generated for you. Another approach, you might like this. There's an app called Learning Studio AI. You write a prompt, and it creates a totally original course on any topic you want. Again, I'm not suggesting you use this for everything. Pero creating syllabi can be very time-consuming. At least now you have a life hack to start up something. All the way to the quizzes, kasama. It just takes 90 seconds. Analysis of content is very good, for me, one of the more reliable uses of this. So for example, I have this article on Senator Marcos wanting to regulate AI for jobs. And I said, just, can you summarize this for me in 5 bullets? And there you go. Or you can be a bit more evocative. This is the article on the Amazon walkout after their layoffs a few months ago. And I said, why don't you summarize this but using the 7 elements of story? What's the plot, what's the tone, theme, setting, conflict, characters, and point of view? And it did it. It helps with analyzing content better. No? So I think using AI to speed up the understanding of existing information, I think it's fair game. I think the touchy part is where you plagiarize something or infringe on copyright. No? Have you heard of ChatPDF? It's a ChatGPT but using a PDF. So you upload a PDF and then you can talk to it. So for example, I uploaded, I'm sure you're familiar with the Desiderata poem, no? So I uploaded Desiderata and I said, okay, I'm feeling sad. What's your advice? And it will give me advice based on the poem. You can use this to ingest research, all these things. Sometimes it's better to understand something by asking questions directly of it, as opposed to reading and summarizing it. So give it a try, no? chatpdf.com. Of course, the world of art and image generation is one emerging area of AI that's very popular. So Craiyon is one of the latest AI. You can just put any prompt you want and then select if you want it as a drawing, as a photo, as a picture, and it just takes a few seconds and you have art. This is a good one, Scribbled Diffusion. You draw a little sketch and then you put a prompt and then it will use that sketch to generate art for you. So this gives you a bit more control over what outcome you want. Doesn't even have to be a good sketch. Parang general na sketch lang. So here I said, peaceful lakeside scenery with rolling hills. And then yan yun lumabas. 11 Labs is the most popular voice AI now. You can use any one of prepackaged voices, or you can record your own voice and it will encode it for you. And now you can have your voice, basically voice over any text. Now the danger here is, what if people use this to impersonate you? That's the challenge. Soundful is for music. So music is not safe from AI. In fact, this is replacing a lot of background music artists' work. Especially if you're into content creation and you don't want to get cited for copyright, you just ask AI to generate a completely original piece of music. You can choose the tone, the mood, the key, the speed, and then now you have unlimited music. Good for the rest of us, but what about our musicians and their livelihood? No? And then, this is the AI detector that I'm finding relatively reliable. You can find it at content@scale.ai/AI content detector. It will detect whether an image or text was AI generated. But I think it's not foolproof, but more or less, it picks it up maybe 8 out of 10 times. Okay, so I want to demonstrate one area or approach to prompting that isn't as popular yet, no? And that's using AI to generate ideas for brainstorming. So, for example, these 4 areas of practice, I won't get into detail anymore, like data visualization, computer vision, language processing, and robotic process automation. Recently, we conducted a workshop that's wanted to brainstorm uses of AI for business. No? And I said, okay, if we take these 4 areas of AI and then find a popular business framework, I just used the FIRM framework. For those of you who are into risk management, you might be familiar with this. So FIRM stands for financial, infrastructure, reputational, and marketplace. Basically 4 things you need to manage in any business. And I just prompted the AI. I'm researching applications of these 4 areas of AI for the FIRM framework. Can you give me suggestions? And it came up with this. No? Maybe when you get a copy of the slides, you can zoom in. But it basically gave me ideas on where to use data visualization, where to use computer vision, basically thought starters. And for brainstorming workshops, this can be excellent. Again, the only thing that needs to change here is what framework you use. The area of practice in AI can be the same. Just substitute FIRM for whatever it is you want. You can use it for planning, you can use it for goal setting. And it's not following AI blindly, but you're using AI to explore a lot of unknown terrain, and it's up to the humans to start narrowing down. I wanted to share this before I get to the last bit. No? This is coming from a research paper called Societal Impact from Research. It's from Springer. And it attempts to measure the impact of academic research onto social areas, such as, do we inform public opinion? Do we improve quality of life? Do we improve health? Do we support sustainable development? Do we result in economic development or commercial applications? And do we influence government policy? So this is a short sampling of a longer list. And various areas contribute to these impacts differently. Certainly, medicine has a big impact on health and quality of life. But the general trend is most academic fields don't contribute much to societal impact, except informing future research. So we are feeding ourselves with more ammunition to do research, because now we need to cite past research. And this is for me a good, in a way, wake-up call. Research is not being used by society. We're seeing society stumble. We're seeing society fail. When the knowledge that might help society is actually here in our midst. What's missing? Ideation is missing. No one is using our work to apply it there. And maybe that's an opportunity for AI to make a difference. Okay, I want to close with this last section on ethics, no, as a rejoinder to Father Marquez's speech. It's interesting that the godfathers of AI are now all up in arms asking for a pause in research. The same people who are actually researching AI. So you gotta wonder why that's the case. When just a few years ago, the same people were firing their ethical AI teams from their midst. When Elon Musk took over Twitter last year, first people he fired was the ethical team. Dr. Timnit Gebru of Google was let go 2 years ago from Google. So what's happening? Of course, we can entertain conspiracy theories or existential dilemmas, but one thing is for certain, people are now, in a way, pleasantly surprised we actually got this far in a short span of time. If you had polled scientists 2 years ago, how many years would it be before we achieve general intelligence? They would have said 50 years. Nowadays, if you ask them, they say it's less than 10. Some of them are even saying by 2030 we will achieve AGI. So it's food for thought, no, on how technologies are changing fast. I want to point at some of the prevailing challenges with AI. One is, whenever you deal with probabilistic models, there's always a margin of error. And that error can be magnified, no? So this is popular, no? Chihuahua or raisin bread, or puppy and bagel. So the problems here are subtle, but they have wide-ranging impact if we start using these machines to make decisions based on probabilistic distributions. If we're not careful, we will efficiently discriminate against people in the wrong way. And I'll show you an example of that in a bit. Another thing that I want to highlight everyone on, especially if you're mathematicians, this image on the left is my favorite diagram on how forecasts are always wrong until the end. Because at any point in that graph, you see the red line is the forecast. The more data you have, the more accurate it will be. But at any point in that graph, the red line was actually wrong up until the end. So there's always this margin of error, and we have to be humble about this. I first made this popular during COVID-19. Everyone is putting out forecasts on how many cases here and there. No one got it right, actually. And now that we're finally over the pandemic, no one wants to call it. No one wants to say we're actually done. Na-trauma na. And then this right-hand diagram here, if you can read it, this is actually from statistics. It's called Anscombe's Quartet. It's a lesson that you can't trust statistics 100%. Each of these four graphs have exactly the same regression equation, the same variance, the same standard deviation. But the dots are all over the place. They're different. So you can't be absolutely certain that just because the stats say this, that's actually the reality. There's actually a third diagram I wanted to show. This is a more classical one. Do you remember back in the day when the Earth was at the center of the universe? And the path of Mercury and Venus was a floral pattern around the Earth. That's actually provable mathematically using calculus. But it was wrong. And the wrong thing there was not the math. It was the assumption that the Earth is at the center of the universe. Change the assumption, and the math realigns. Suddenly, we're all revolving around the sun. And that explains why it's a floral pattern. There's no reason why a floral pattern should exist in physics, but it's observable. That's also a reminder that no matter how good your math is, no matter how good your science is, if your fundamental principles are wrong, then you could be completely off the mark. That, for me, gives me a tremendous sense of humility every time. This is a more subtle problem, and I'm nearly at the end. Apologies for extending. This is known as the alignment problem. So there's an AI running this boat in a computer simulation, and it's a racetrack for the boat. But then the goal was, please maximize your score. And in one iteration, the AI figured out that the best way to maximize the score was never to finish the track, but to keep picking up the bonus items as they respawn. No? This is a challenge because, as I said earlier, if we're not careful about specifying the goal to an automated agent, it might decide to do something we never expect. For example, what if we had an AI running a hospital and we gave it a goal? Please minimize our cases of cancer. It might just decide to kill all the cancer patients. I'm not kidding. No? That's a very real threat. And we also have to be wary about what we call unintended interactions. This image on the left is a man in India who committed suicide after chatting with a chatbot. Not ChatGPT, no, another chatbot. And it's because the conversations are so real and they're so unpredictable that this person who had obviously an emotional problem reacted to it in a negative way. You know? This image naman on the right is a woman who wanted to marry an AI. She suffered a heartbreak. She was so lonely. She used an AI called Replica, which is a service provided by a company. If you wanted to talk to someone, don't have anyone to talk to. The AI was so good that she fell in love with the AI. Now wants to marry the AI. So a bigger problem here is not necessarily how the algorithm is going to develop. It's how we relate to the algorithm, especially when we completely blur the line between machine and humans. Father Marquez mentioned privacy. This is a recent case in Samsung. Their engineers were happily using ChatGPT to check their programming, their code, which was all proprietary information by Samsung pala. And then not realizing that other people who were using ChatGPT started to see evidence of Samsung's proprietary code in the response. So this is also a reminder that we only can trust the word of OpenAI and these software companies as far as the safety of these things are concerned. But doesn't mean they're really safe. It's up to us to make our decision. And obviously Samsung has now banned the use of ChatGPT in their company. This is a diagram borrowed from statistics. No? If you remember the difference between precision and accuracy. You can be precise, that means your shots are very near to each other, but you can be completely off the mark. Or you can be accurate, you're generally around the bullseye, but you're imprecise because your shots are far away from each other.
This is an analogy for capability and alignment. Capability is how well an AI optimizes its goal. Alignment is how well the goal matches what we humans want. And that's the harder problem. You can be a capable machine, but misaligned. And here are examples of other AI that are misaligned. For example, you've used Waze, I'm sure. So the Israelis used Waze and inadvertently led them to a Palestinian camp in the Gaza Strip, and they got into a problem. Some people died. Because Waze depends on crowdsourcing data. So it's garbage in, garbage out. If no one put the Palestinian camp in Waze, and who would, then it would be problematic. This image on the right is a couple in Brazil taking a vacation there, and they misspelled the destination of their resort. Punto del Sol, naging Punta del Sol, something like that. One letter. And instead of going to the resort, Waze brought them into a slum. And there was a gang war happening there, and the woman got shot and died. So, as a creator of Waze, would you imagine these things? That's also the challenge with technology. You can never anticipate what we call edge cases, the misuse of the technology, whether intentional or accidental. I'm sure everyone, well, not on TikTok, but I'm sure most of you are on Facebook, siguro, or maybe Twitter. Facebook is a fantastic marketing machine. It allows advertisers to target people based on characteristics, demographics. But because of that, the way Facebook now works is it encourages polarization. It highlights fake news, it highlights hate speech. Why? Because it's designed to segment populations for marketing. Hindi na realize ng creator ng Facebook that the best way to segment us pala is through hate and division. And that's still an ongoing debate with Facebook. That's why now, everywhere you go in social media, there's disinformation, there's people attacking each other. We are being incited to hate because of the wrong goal that was put into the machine. And finally, I was talking about misclassification earlier. These were two cases in the UK immigration on getting a passport. Basically, facial recognition tells you if your photo is correct or not. But if that algorithm was trained on Caucasians, mostly, how will it deal with an Asian man or a black man? Sabi sa Asian, please open your eyes. Sabi niya, no, my eyes are open. Or sabi dun sa black man, si Joshua Bada, it looks like your mouth is open. Sabi niya, no, I just have big lips. So that's the problem. Our algorithms, if we're not careful, can be unethical, they can be harmful, owing to just the simple fact that the data was biased or incorrectly sampled. So going back to statistics ulit tayo. And finally, satire and disinformation. This was a viral photo of Biden in Divisoria. This was generated by Midjourney. Several other photos also emerged. Si Prince William, si Vladimir Putin, eating isaw, having taho. Obviously for us, we know that this is not true because we're familiar with isaw and Divisoria and taho. But to someone abroad, would they know? Si Father kanina showed the Pope with a quote that was also generated using image generation tools. Very lifelike. You will never know it was actually fake. This one on the right was actually passed off as fact, but was discovered to be misinformation because if you look closely, the gloves have 6 fingers. That's one thing that AI always gets wrong for now. They can't get fingers right. So do you limit satire with the intention of limiting disinformation? I think you're violating 2 things already if you do that. No? How do you protect the right to free expression, the right to free speech, but then on the other hand, make sure that the veracity of things online is good? This is also a snapshot of how different countries are dealing with this. Within the same week, Japan declared that AI will not be subject to copyright in Japan. But then at the same time, the EU put out some AI rules, which includes copyright. So that's just me saying governments are not in agreement of how to treat these technologies. And we have our own version of this as well. Some lawmakers are putting out regulations now. I think, yes, Senator Marcos wants to protect jobs. Salcedo wants to protect copyright, and Congressman Barbers wants to set up an AI agency. Now, on the surface, these are all actually pretty progressive regulation. But I have to wonder, who are they consulting to put these rules in place? Because if you permit me a bit of activism, the SIM Card Registration Act is a stupid law, and it can't be implemented. And it's now generated a black market in registered SIMs. So what did we really do? No? I'm part of this group called the Ambit. It's actually run by very young people, mga Gen Z. Inaya lang ako to be an advisor. They're the first to put out a public statement to encourage the Philippines to look at ethics, safety, and governance. And they wrote the 3 lawmakers. They actually have a petition out. You can find it there, bit.ly/the Ambit petition with the capitals. I think they only have about 500 signatures pa lang, and they want to get more. And I'm pleasantly surprised to see our youth very, very actively looking at the risks of AI, while the rest of us are still kind of wondering what to do with it. So that's it, no? That's my talk. I hope you found that interesting. I inserted a slide while listening to Father Marquez. I couldn't help it because his talk about ethics was so compelling. And he quoted, obviously, one of my idols as well. Idol natin si Aquinas. But I found this particular quote of Aquinas compelling. The slenderest knowledge that may be obtained of the highest things is more desirable than the most certain knowledge obtained of lesser things. And if something about AI is true, it is certain knowledge about lesser things. Okay, so before I end, I just want to invite everyone, if you're not on TikTok, join me in TikTok. I'm using it to communicate to the youth. I'm actually on every platform right now. And I really think there needs to be more discourse from people like us, no? Educators, academics, because our voices need to be heard, because everyone's looking for direction right now. No one is doing it. I also have an offer to do a 1-hour briefing. This is one of them. To any organization, any group, if you want me to guest in some of your classes, please invite me. Just as a way of spreading the awareness. And then, please join me every Saturday. I conduct a free webinar, usually around noontime, kaya I call it AI for Lunch. I also upload this to my YouTube channel. You can find me there, youtube/DocLigot. And this is something that will come out within the week. We're going to be launching a series of design workshops for AI. We actually ran this in UST already. It was very successful. I think there's no shortage of people who can implement AI, but there could be a shortage of people who can kind of ideate how AI can be used, because now we're too scared or something. So we're here to help. If you want, please reach out. And that's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Doc. So, Doc, may I request you to go on center stage? And I'm going to present. Will you be able to join us until noon? Ay, okay. So, ito na lang po. Colegio de San Juan de Letran, Intramuros, Manila, Office of the Vice President for Academic Affairs, Certificate of Appreciation is given to Mr. Dominic Doc Ligot for sharing his invaluable time and expertise as speaker during the 7th Academic Summit with the theme, The Crux of Artificial Intelligence, AI, How a Catholic School Should Harness AI. With this topic, Rise of Generative AI, Opportunities and Risks. Held at the St. Thomas Hall on Tuesday, July 18, 2023, from 8 a.m. to 12 noon. Given this 18th day of July in the year of our Lord 2023, signed Associate Professor Cristina M. Castro Cabral, PhD, Vice President for Academic Affairs. Friends, Doc Ligot. Ang galing. Doc, sabi niya, you still have around 30 minutes, no? Okay lang, uupo tayong dalawa para we will be encouraging some questions from the audience. Hindi pa po ito yung panel discussion. Our third speaker is already present, no? What a wonderful day today. Nahihirapan ka ba sa ilaw? Opo. Patayin natin to, nahihirapan yata si Doc sa ilaw. Okay. Anyone from the audience who would like to ask a question, comment on the talk?
Well, firstly, thank you for your time and for lending this place. I know that there's just so much negativity about AI, but I'm happy that at least Letran is taking it positively. I'm pleasantly surprised to hear that the Pope, or at least the Church, sees AI as good. I think we lack that kind of news right now. Everyone is thinking AI is evil. I think it ultimately redounds to the intention of the humans.
That's true.
It's up to us to make what to make of AI.
That's true. Before we proceed, Doc, look at the screen on your left and or your right. We are joined by our campus in Abukay, Bataan. And these are our faculty members as well as our academic teaching and non-teaching personnel. So all throughout, since yesterday, we are actually holding this sessions sabay.
Yeah, shout out to Bataan. Actually, my wife is a Bataan native. She's from Samal.
Samal.
So that's parang dalawang
towns away.
Dalawang town yata before Abukay.
Okay, sige po. So, any questions? Sinabi kanina ni Doc, no? Okay ba, Doc, na we will give copies of your talk to those who are present. Isang yan, no? And please, let us be very conscious, no? Not to share it to anybody else. Parang ito yung takeaway ng those who are present, who took time to really attend, no? I also asked Father Marquez if he could also provide a copy of his talk, no? Yes din daw. Kaya thank you very much sa dalawang ito. Truly, we are blessed, no? Any questions, comments, suggestions? Yes. Yes, anak. From the College of Education.
Good morning. Ayan. Instructor Concepcion. Good morning. I'd like to comment first, Doc Ligon. I actually had the first glance or the first glimpse of artificial intelligence through your interview with Christian Esguerra last December. Yung kasagsagan, yung mga unang linggo ng pag-launch ng ChatGPT. And I have to admit, it wasn't a sexy topic. I mean, I'm using the word, no? It wasn't a topic that na pakikinggan mo ng mahabang panahon. And we're thankful that for how many months, it has become more reachable. Mas nagiging abot na sa pag-unawa ng bawat isa, lalo na dito sa academe. So the question now is, we're also engaging ourselves to different communities, reaching out to communities through our community extension programs. Also in light of what we call digital divide, because not everyone has access to these devices. Pero marami rin yung hindi mo akalain na merong mga cellphone, pero sila yung mga masisipag maghapon na mag-scroll sa kanilang TikTok, sa kanilang Facebook, lalo yan kung ay naka-free data ka pa. In fact, some of the telcos, meron silang free TikTok with their subscription, kaya nagiging abot kaya yung TikTok. So, what can you share with us pagdating sa application, or how can you make these people who we reach out through community engagement, paano natin may papaunawa sa kanila yung AI?
Actually, a similar question was asked during the AI summit a few weeks ago. I uploaded that talk also on YouTube. I think the first thing we need to acknowledge is tayong nasa NCR, we live in a bubble. We think we are participating in the global economy. I think for the most part we are. Pero the moment tumawid ka ng Region 4A, internet connection drops. The farther out you go, like I think the worst, quote-unquote, experience online was when I was in Mindanao, in Cotabato City, the capital of Barm, which is our Muslim brothers and sisters. They literally are alien to the internet. So paano yun? How do we help them? Just to give you an idea, in Cotabato City, there are no traffic lights. Ganun kalayo yung level of development. And that's already the capital city of the emerging Barm, basically the Barm government. No? We have to provide access, first and foremost. Kaya nga, one technological development that excites me is the widespread availability of satellite internet.
yung Starlink. Although it's still a bit prohibitive, I think they gave a special rate, parang 19,000 na lang yata per dish. But come on, 19,000 is beyond the reach of your average household. But maybe this is where I think we can call on both the public and the private sector. But di tayo nakakalat ng mga satellite dish all over the place? Why do we continue to rely on the limited connectivity of our telco providers? Or why don't the telco providers do it? I think it just needs a concerted effort, provide access. Second, we are communicating in English, but we are Filipinos. Bakit di tayo, di ba, mag-communicate using yung native tongue natin? Kahit ako napapataglish. So we need effort to translate these instructional materials, these websites into native tongue. Kahit na the top 10 dialects lang can go a long way. No? If we can get this into Ilocano, Cebuano, Kapampangan, ang daming maaabot. The irony is, everyone in the provinces, I'll generalize unfairly, their dream is to go to Manila to get a job. Or even better, get out of the Philippines to get a job. So yung mga OFW natin, ganun. Why couldn't we retain them here? So I think AI has that ability to level the playing field. Pero let's deal with the basics first. Let's give access. Let's localize it for languages. And let's also teach with AI. Kasi ang nangyayari ngayon, again, generalizing unfairly, we see, I'm not saying Letran, obviously, but many other schools see AI as a threat to education. We want to ban it. We want to limit it. I think in the same way calculators have been embraced by math. And I like ako, my background is actually accounting, no? from university. I used to use columnar pads, no? And this is before the advent of spreadsheets. Ngayon, it's normal to use Excel, no? for accountancy. I think ganyan din, we need to radically reimagine our curricula, both in the formal institution and even the vocational schools. First things first, access. Government, I know, is already trying several initiatives, like they had this Wi-Fi project na dapat nationwide coverage, obviously for one reason or another, na antala yan. But that should not stop us and lobbying with private sector to provide access. Sana nga eh. Kasi kahit sabihin mo for, let's say, 20,000 pesos, how many people have 2 million pesos? That's already 100 dishes. 100 dishes! That's 100 barangays with their own satellite dish. Why aren't we pouring out instead of the usual mga charitable contributions? Charity drive tayo for internet, data philanthropy. No? Hindi pa siya na-invento sa Pilipinas. But I think soon, people will start doing it. We're certainly going to get into it since I run a social impact company. Kaya pala ako nag-shift to social impact, just to let you know. I came from banking and then IT. And then I realized there's got to be more to life than just earning a return on your investment palagi. In fact, most of your students will go to their jobs and they think the real world is making money and CSR is the sideline. Actually, it's the opposite. CSR is the job. We're supposed to be dealing with hunger and poverty and climate. And making money is the sideline, no? To make sure you make it sustainable. But you know, unfortunately, we don't have that mindset yet. Kasi nga, we're in a scarcity-driven environment. But you know, with God's grace, we changed that mindset. Mahaba masyado yung sagot ko.
Hindi. I would like to butt in. No? It's true, no? It depends on our administrators. How open are we? And how we will be able to redirect the institution where it's going to be, where it is most responsive and relevant. True, when we were talking about AI, matagal ko to sinasabi, artificial intelligence. And with God's grace, we were able to invite very good speakers in a very, very short span of time. Talaga po, the academic summit, usually the program is released as early as June. Hindi nyo po nahalata, the program was released only last week. But I do not know, we were blessed with people like you, thank you Doc, no, for being here and physically presenting your presso. May bago siyang sinabi sa akin, sabi niya, I'm going to attach my presso here. Sabi ko kay Mercy, presso?
Presso na.
Oo, yun pala yun. Okay. What about Bataan? May tanong po ba sa Bataan? May we call on our colleagues in Bataan? Questions, please.
In case you're wondering where preso comes from, kapartner siya ng convo.
Is preso the same as presentation? Tama ba
presentation.
ko? Okay, preso. May bago akong natutunan. Bataan, pag wala na naman magtanong sa bataan,
Baka kailangan pumunta ako sa
graded
bataan.
recitation ako. Ian Sec, are you there? Yan. Nawala ang bataan? Jenny?
Could be internet, unfortunately.
Ayan na. Ian, can you hear me? Ayun na po. Go ahead, Ian.
Question to Doc, in the context of communication, well, AI, in the context of communication, has rather become ubiquitous, if I may use the term, especially in the realm of social media. And social media is one powerful platform. How do you think, Doc, AI can be an ally of social media, say, in the context of journalism or politics, everything that is posted on social media? How can AI be an ally of us? Thank you.
Yeah, that's a good rejoinder. Actually, AI and social media have kind of a love-hate relationship. I mentioned earlier what's happening on Facebook. AI is driving that behavior. So we're seeing the negative effects of AI already. We're getting polarized. And the reason why fake news is so rampant is it generates a lot of engagement. And that's the goal that was given to the Facebook AI. Generate a lot of engagement. You put content in front of people that encourages them to stay online. No? Yan ang problema. On the flip side, there hasn't been enough work, I think, where AI can help guide people against negative content or spotting fakes. I mean, to be sure, there are moves by many institutions, including Facebook. Like we did a study back in 2021 on infodemics. That term came up. Infodemic is basically relating the barrage of information online, mostly fake, to an epidemic. So the behaviors that infodemics exhibit are similar to disease. There are carriers, there are super spreaders. You can do contact tracing to see sino ba yung unang nagpalabas nitong news na to. And there are mutations. If you study the text structure of social media posts, during COVID, it started out as COVID is a bioweapon. Then it became COVID is re-engineered HIV. And then later, COVID is a way of controlling population. And then nung nagka-vaccines na, vaccines are a conspiracy theory, or vaccines are actually there to kill people, or they're using vaccines to target people. So the same people pumping the same fake news, but the content changes. In the same way, COVID has alpha, beta, delta, gamma, etc. Nagmumutate siya. And that's actually insightful because there's also research that shows you can inoculate or vaccinate people against fake news by showing them examples. And that's actually a big area of interest for us in computational social science. How do we educate people better? And kasama na dyan yung connected to the earlier question, in the provinces where there isn't enough education about social media, but they have access, yan yung nangyayari, no? People are not trained to get all of this barrage and make sense of it. So that's where we need to step up as educators. I also work with the journalist sector, and I'll tell you already where they're struggling. In journalism, there is a highly valued practice known as fact-checking. So when you put out something online, you make sure it has been fact-checked. In fact, sumasablay nga sila sa fact-check recently. Dami mga lumulusot. No? Have you heard of Justin Martyr? The boy who claimed to have 300 scholarships. But I'm sure as Catholic academics, you know who Justin Martyr is. He is one of the historians relied upon to prove the veracity of historical Jesus. So I think the name of Justin Martyr was intentional. It was a parody na maraming naniwala kay Justin Martyr. The same way in, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, Father Marquez, that's also a hotly debated topic, whether Justin Martyr was in fact actually citing actual events, or was this all invented? I mean, the people who put this stuff out, they're not dumb people. They are intelligent. They are propagandists. So propaganda predates the internet. Nagkaroon lang ng convergence ngayon because of electronic media. But I think AI has a big role to play into policing it. Yun nga, it's up to us to give it the goals. Diba? We are the parameter setting. And right now, be ready already. The bad guys are using AI very well. But the rest of us, we're still coming to terms with it. We really need to step it up.
Yeah, that's true. That's the challenge we in the academy really need to face and really work hard on. No? Going through the comments and suggestions you encoded in our evaluation yesterday, there were several comments and suggestions as well as recommendations that we conduct trainings and seminars specific to the use of AI. No, mayroong nagsasabi if we will be able to include it as part of Catalyst. I have spoken with our Lead Teach head as well as our Lead Teach members. Sinabi ni Doc kanina, he is willing to probably spend an hour or two in our classes in order to educate our students as well as faculty members on the latest tools that we could make use of using artificial intelligence. So, palakpakan natin muli si Mr. Doc Ligot. Maraming salamat po.
Thank you for your time.
So,